Now we move to some problems in section 1.7. Again, you want to make sure that you study the material on page 40, particularly understand the material in the shaded area, and also table 12 on page 41 before you attempt the exercises. And once again, there are bunches of examples that will guide you through. So section 1.7, let's start with number 20. It says rewrite the number without radicals or exponents. So you have number 20 is minus, and minus inside the parentheses 8 over 27th to the minus 2/3 power. Minus 2/3 power. Now this can be written as minus, instead of 8, I write this as 2 to the 3rd. Instead of 27, I write it as a 3 to the 3rd to the minus 2/3 power. Now therefore, you can write this as minus 2 to the 3rd to the minus 2/3, 3 to the 3rd to the minus 2/3. Like that. Therefore equal to minus here 2 to the 3rd to the minus 2/3. You multiply the powers. So it's 3 multiplied by minus 2/3. That would be minus 2. 2 to the minus 2. In the denominator, again, you multiply the powers. So it would be 3 to the minus 2 equal to minus, one more minus. Now, anything with the negative power, you can switch it from numerator to denominator or denominator to the numerator and make it with a positive power. So here 2 to the minus 2 would go down and becomes 2 squared. 3 to the minus 2 from denominator would come up and become 3 squared. So you would have minus 3 squared is 9, 2 squared is 4. Therefore, now this minus with the minus inside the parenthesis would make it a positive. Therefore, the answer is 9/4. Now, we go to another problem. Problem number 38, which says S to the 1/3 times 2s minus s to the 1/4. This would be equal to, when you multiply s to the 1/3 by 2s to the 1, you would add up the powers. So, well, the 2 would remain here. 1 base s. Now you add up the power. 1/3 and 1 is equal to 4/3. Then s to the 1/3 times s to the 1/4. That would be minus s. Again, add up the power. 1/3 plus 1/4 is 12. 7 to the 12th. That's number 38. We're going to do 2 more problems from this section before we move on to the next. Let's see, number 52. We have the 3rd root of minus the 4th root of x to the 3rd. One way we can look at this, we can write it as an exponent. This can be written as x to the 3rd to the 1/4 with a minus in front of it, and the whole thing to the 1/3. So inside the bracket first, you would have minus h to the 3rd to 1/4 would become h to the 3/4. Now the whole thing to the 1/3. So when you multiply these, again, it would be minus x. You multiply the power, 3/4 times 1/3 would be 1/4. In other words, the answer is minus 4th root of x. Let's do one problem which would be different, and it's talking about rationalizing numerator or denominator. Rationalizing basically means to get rid of the square root sign. Whenever they're talking about rationalizing numerator, you get rid of the square root sign in the numerator. Rationalizing the denominator means to get rid of the square root in the denominator. Let's look at a problem about this rationalization. Number 66. It says rationalize the denominator of the expression. You have x times y divided by square root of x plus square root of y. Now, since we are rationalizing the denominator, what we have to do is to multiply both the denominator and the numerator by the same term you have in the denominator, except with the opposite sign. So this would be square root of x minus square root of y. Same thing in the numerator, square root of x minus square root of y. Now, when you multiply the denominators together, when you multiply them, if you recall in the special product, we had a plus b times a minus b, and that was equal to a squared minus b squared. So if you assume here, this is your a, this is like your a, and this here is like your b, so basically what you have is a plus b times a minus b. And the answer to that would be a squared minus b squared. So in this case, a is the square root of x squared, minus b squared, which is square root of y squared. The numerator is x times y multiplied by this. So it's x times y times square root of x minus square root of y. Now again, the denominator, square root of x squared is x minus square root of y squared is y. Numerator remains as xy times square root of x minus square root of y. That's it. This is how you rationalize the denominator. As you can see, in the denominator, we no longer have a square root sign. This is rationalizing the denominator.